Tell us your name.
Lisa
where you live.
I'm sorry. Lisa Ruckman. I reside in Panama City, Florida.
Ms. Ruckman, did you used to work for the medical examiner's office?
That's correct.
Okay. In what capacity?
For 6.5 years, I was employed with the office. After the first 2 years, I was promoted to Director of Investigations, and I retained that position until January the 8th of this year.
As an investigator or Director of Investigations for the medical examiner's office, what were your duties on a day-to-day basis, ma'am?
They consisted of scene investigations, death investigations in the office, forensic photography, fingerprinting, assisting in identification, assisting in autopsies, reviewing medical records, working with families, signing,
And your training and experience that qualified you for that position, ma'am?
Correct.
I'd like for you to think back to August of last year, I believe August the 10th to be precise. Were you employed in the same capacity then?
Correct.
On that day, were you present when an autopsy was performed on a little girl that was identified to you as Adrianna Hutto?
Yes, I was.
What were your responsibilities that day during the autopsy, when the autopsy was being performed?
As the director, I was assisting the investigator and Dr. Siebert with what's preliminary called the workup or the preparation of the decedent and the photography and fingerprinting and such before the autopsy exam is actually taken. During this procedure, ma'am, now just so we understand, you did not go to the scene of this homicide, did you, ma'am? No.
In fact, when you first saw Adrianna was on August the 10th, is that correct?
That is correct.
How is a body received in the medical examiner's office?
Since she died in Bay County EMS would have transported her to our facility and placed her in a body bag that's secured by a locking tag. And once we start the examination, the decedent is brought into the autopsy room, and that lock is photographed before it's removed, and so they're received initially in a locked bag.
Once her body was taken out of this bag, did you observe any injuries to her body, ma'am? Well,
yes.
Specifically to her head.
Yes.
Tell us what you observed.
There were several bruises across the forehead and one to her left cheek. There were, I believe, 2 bruises on her chest and one on her shoulder. Those were visible. Well, the shoulder wasn't, but the other were visible even with the hospital gown on.
Ultimately, you were able to see the entire body.
Correct.
Okay. You had an opportunity to see a couple of photographs. Will you witness that, ma'am, please?
Yes, sure.
Would these photographs help you describe the injuries that you saw, ma'am?
Yes.
I'm going to show you first the photograph that is marked as State's Exhibit 4B. If you would come over here on this side. Let me get up. And the other photograph will be State's Exhibit 20B. Now, this is a photograph of Adrianna in the hospital, and this is the other one at the autopsy. Is that correct?
Correct.
The 20B. All right. If you would, ma'am.
Give me just a second to see if I can, I don't know what I've done to the cameras up there. Okay. Now then, I apologize for that.
Okay. This will be 4B. Would you point out the injuries that you noticed first when you started to assist in this autopsy?
The most significant were the two on the midline of the forehead, obviously as well, this bruising to this area. Also noted are two smaller bruises to the right side of the forehead over here, and there's a bruise also on the left cheek that I described that was apparent.
I will show you now what is marked as State's Exhibit 20B. And is this how she looked as she was removed from the body bag, ma'am?
That is correct.
And her hospital gown was removed?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Ms. Rugman, these bruises, what would you call these injuries, ma'am?
Through my experience, initially, we didn't have any information. I personally didn't have any information, and from my experience, it did look consistent to be that of a left hand.
Okay. Did you do anything during this process where these photographs were being made to either confirm or deny that, ma'am? I
did. To test my original hypothesis that it was a handprint, I placed my hand over the bruises, and as you can see on the side of the cheek here, it lined up perfectly with this side of my left thumb. This would be the index finger where it lined up, my middle finger, ring finger, and then either one of these two smaller bruises matched where my pinky would be, and the ball of my hand was consistent with that. The mark that was on the bridge of the nose, it did seem to fit.
And if you would, ma'am, just use your left hand as you would on your face, demonstrating to the jury how that would have been. Okay. All right. Now, you didn't make any photographs, or you didn't have the other lady make any photographs of this. Is that correct?
No, we didn't. Normally, if there's a weapon or a tool that we know has been used, we'll do that in comparison. But a similar instrument or a similar hand, that wouldn't necessarily be taken because our photographs are evidence.
So, as I understand it, what you're saying then is your hand matched up with that, and your hand matched up with those bruises. So, in your opinion, would those bruises be consistent with that hand?
Exactly. I don't think the witnesses didn't even stay close to an expert. I haven't heard anything about her credentials to even identify what a bruise is, much less that it came from a human hand.
If I could just back up a little bit. Ma'am, you cannot say definitively that a hand caused this, can you, ma'am?
No.
Because you were not there.
Exactly.
And it would depend on the shape or size, the size of the hand and the location of the hand.
Well, I object. She could even call it a bruise. We've got doctors that come in and identify bruises. How can she doesn't even have the expertise to call it a bruise.
Okay, the objection's overruled.
Could you repeat your question, please?
You cannot say definitively that it was one hand or any particular hand, because that would depend on the size of the hand and what the position of the hand on the face. Is that correct?
Certainly, only that it was consistent or not consistent.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. No further questions.
You can take your seat back.
Ms. Ruckman, are you a medical doctor?
No, sir.
Do you have any medical training whatsoever?
No, formally, no, sir.
Ever been to an EMT school where they teach you how to be an emergency medical technician?
No, sir.
Do you have a college degree?
No, sir.
But you did work for Dr. Seaver, didn't you?
I did.
And he's gone, right? He's no longer a medical examiner. Is that correct?
No longer in the state of Florida, no, sir.
Okay. And he's gone because the Medical Examiners Commission found that he did sloppy autopsies. Isn't that right?
The prosecution's case hinged on the coroner's ruling that Adrianna's death was a homicide. But it turned out that Dr. Charles Siebert, the county coroner, was under investigation for a series of botched autopsies. Given the other attacks on his credibility, was it possible Siebert had made mistakes in this case too? Walter Smith believed it was. Smith deposed him just weeks before the trial. He asked the doctor to clarify his view of two injuries identified.
Examiner opined that her face was held on the bottom of the pool
causing the injury to the back of the head. And then when he was informed this is not a concrete pool, this is just a rubber inflatable pool, he really didn't have any explanation for that injury.
If the bottom of the pool was too soft to have caused the injuries, Smith didn't think the facial bruises could have been made there either.
How would you have an object there to press against in order to get enough force to cause the bruising?
Yeah, I don't know if it's possible. It doesn't look like from this picture that you can actually reach the bottom of the pool. I don't know.
The bruises on Adrianna's face were a key element of the state's case against Amanda. And Dr. Siebert had just admitted that they most likely couldn't have happened in an inflatable pool. Smith was sure he had grounds for reasonable doubt. And then, just as Amanda Lewis's trial was beginning, Dr. Siebert left the state.
I wouldn't agree to that.
And the governor said that he lost confidence in his ability to do autopsies in our circuit. Isn't that correct?
I'm not certain if he was quoted as saying that or not.
Well, wouldn't you admit that allowing an untrained person, somebody without a degree, somebody without medical training, to come to court and testify about how injuries were made is kind of sloppy?
Objection's over. You may not.
Do you agree with that? I mean, where's Dr. Siebert?
I would not agree with your comment.
Okay. So, since your hand fits that injury there, perhaps you ought to be arrested for a homicide because it's your hand that fits those injuries perfectly, doesn't it?
It does.
And the objection is sustained as to the form of the question.
Now, you wouldn't say that you have more knowledge than Dr. Minyard does, do you?
No.
And if Dr. Minyard couldn't explain those injuries by placing her hand over the child's face, what gives you the ability to do that?
I had the advantage of being there during the examination.
Okay, and you stood there and watched Dr. Siebert do his examination, who's no longer our medical examiner, and you put your hand over her face and you said, that's how it happened.
I felt that the pattern injury of a human hand was consistent with that I saw on her.
Have you done any studies about how human hands cause injuries to faces?
No.
Read any medical literature about it?
No.
Do you know how much pressure is required to cause a bruise on a face by a human hand?
Not by a human hand, no, sir.
Well, demonstrate on your face exactly how you think those injuries occurred.
Well, it differs because certainly my face is a different size than hers.
Well, just put your hand on your face, and I want you to press your face hard enough so you can make those bruises up there.
I don't think that I could do that to myself.
I don't think you could either. Thank you.
Induction.